Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search builds great teams by connecting lawyers in Texas with career opportunities at small and boutique law firms. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel here back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. Before we get started, I want to let you know about a few of the opportunities that we are currently searching for. In Dallas, we are looking for a plaintiff PI attorney, as well as multiple business commercial litigation positions, including one focused on bankruptcy, another on construction. We've got a midsize firm looking for business litigation as well as M&A. So a lot going on in Dallas. In Austin, a family law attorney and a special education attorney. In Tarrant County and in Fort Worth, a family law attorney as well as a corporate and real estate attorney. And then lastly, in Houston, a personal injury attorney and then also an insurance defense attorney. And so if any of those might be of interest to you or someone you know would love to talk with you about it, feel free to reach out, Daniel at varsitysearch.com. All right. Also, a quick reminder that in your feed right now is The Law of Seinfeld, a special movie verdicts style episode that we did on all things legal in the TV show Seinfeld. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to my friend Bobby Saltani and I, who was our guest last week on Monday Mentors, have fun with that one. I hope that you will check it out soon. It was a blast. All right, today we are in Houston, where our guest is Kathleen Turner Beduze. Kathleen is a shareholder with Crain Caton James, where she focuses her practice on fiduciary litigation, estate and probate administration, and guardianship proceedings. Kathleen has been a Texas Super Lawyers Rising Star each of the past 6 years and has been recognized by H Texas Magazine as a top lawyer in Houston each of the past 5 years. She's also been recently named to Best Lawyers in America for Trust and Estate Litigation. Kathleen is affiliated with numerous professional and community organizations and is a regular presenter, speaker, and author on trusts, estates, and probate matters. All right, with that, let's hop into our conversation with Kathleen Turner Beduze on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Kathleen Turner Beduze joins us right now. Kathleen, thanks so much for taking time to come on the show with us.
Thanks, Daniel, for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking with you. And to get started, why don't you share with the folks listening about your practice and your firm? And let's start right there.
Sure. I am a shareholder at Crain Caton James in Houston, Texas, and my practice focuses primarily on fiduciary litigation and guardianship work. The firm, I believe we're at about 45, 46 attorneys.
Yeah.
A total, mid 75. So mid-size growing firm. And we really handle most everything except for criminal and family law. We have environmental, real estate matters, commercial litigation, bankruptcy, banking, estate planning, oil and gas, appellate law. I'm sure I'm missing something in there, but we really... aside from family law and criminal matters, we really have a lawyer in-house that can advise on the issues, most issues.
Yeah. Well, and, you're speaking to the firm size, and something that has come up as I've talked with candidates when I'm doing recruiting stuff and even firms as well, is just kind of this era that we're in, it seems, where, the mega firms kind of do their deal. And then there's a lot of really small firms, but firms that are kind of in your size, kind of in that 40 to 120 lawyer firms. Those are, a lot of people want to be in those firms. There's not many of them anymore. How are you all doing that? It's awesome that you are. And how do you feel that, or how does that look? How do you kind of think about yourselves as it relates to kind of that mid-sized firm market that seems to kind of be hard to come by these days?
So I actually came from big law firm. After right out of Baylor, I went to DLA Piper, was there for about 3 years.
Yeah.
And was able to transition over to Crain Caton in 2012. So I've been here do the math, over a decade.
Right.
And in that time, we've definitely grown the practice. I think when I joined, I think the lawyers were probably closer to the 35 mark.
Yeah.
And, so in 12, 13 years, certainly people have left, but we've also brought on.
Right.
And so I think, there's the pros and cons to being the midsize firm. And, pros being, you have much more work-life balance, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Cons being the salaries aren't as high.
Yeah.
For associates. But I wouldn't say it's affected at least my practice with respect to the clients that come in the door. Because a lot of clients, large corporations, sometimes I feel like they're leaning more towards the mid-sized firms because they're much more affordable. But the legal work is not any less, or the quality is not any less than what you may find at a big firm down the road.
Oh, interesting. So talk a little bit about what's going on in your specific practice area these days. Are there any kind of hot topics or things that are going on in the CLE area? If you go to a CLE, what are kind of the hot topics that people will be talking about? Anything with the legislative session that we just finished or that you're keeping an eye on or interested in?
Well, I think the biggest developments that we continue to see in my area is in 2015, completely revamped the guardianship code. Yeah. And there's very little case law on that. But the legislature has made it very clear that they are leaning against full-blown guardianships and recognizing alternatives such as a power of attorney. And I find that a lot of CLEs, of course, we've only been in Zoom for the last year, but a lot of them focus on, how to move forward basically with less court supervision. And so, as I mentioned, we have quite a few estate planners in my firm, and there's been a lot of overlap between the litigators that litigate the estate plans. And, so a lot of conversations just internally about, okay, with these changes in the legislature related to guardianship specifically, what specific documents should we have our clients as part of our big estate planning package? What should we have them sign? And specifically, what should we put in those documents? So the forms that have been used for decades aren't necessarily reflective of what needs to be in there or what can be in there, because it's much more reflective now to what does an individual want versus what is allowed by law.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. And I'll give you 30 seconds. We can totally edit this out. But speaking of guardianship and what's going on these days, I'll do one pitch for a quick free Britney commentary. If you want to go down that road, that would be, I think, super interesting.
So really interesting. So I actually have a colleague who very into podcasts, very into Britney, very into following it. She used to work for one of the probate courts here in Houston. Yeah. And she was on the mental health docket. So she just, she's also very into social media. I really did not know anything about Free Britney or anything, probably before about 6 months ago. Yeah. But I did see today on my elevator blurb of news that the judge denied her request. And then, of course, I went down a rabbit trail of listening to the released YouTube her letter that she read to the court last week. And I highly suggest anyone that is interested in 30 minutes of just entertainment to go listen to it. Because what I think it reflects is someone, and I'm not saying one way or another whether, because conservatorship in California is very different than guardianship in Texas.
Yes, we should be clear.
Right. I mean, not only the word, but also just the laws behind it. And unfortunately, I've had to look at that for clients that are in California versus something in Texas. Right. But I will say, I also looked at, because I write for the Texas Guardianship Manual, and actually my chapter is on emergency relief and temporary guardianships. And so it truly came I was working on a paper last week, so it really came at a good time to take that 30 minutes of mindless listening. But I think what it really highlights is, Britney is a social media mega star, and she has issues. Now, whether it means that she can't write a check, whether it means that she needs 24-hour supervision, because it's really sad of what, apparently whoever was responsible for signing her up for a new therapist when her old therapist died, put her right in the middle of Hollywood or somewhere where she exited tears and there's paparazzi all around her.
Yeah.
It's a situation where mental health is a real issue. And I think that it is staggering the numbers that are unable to get help when they truly need help.
Right.
But they're also a media fix. It's a media story. And so I think the truth, as is usual, is somewhere in between,
Sure.
the truth of what help Britney needs. I don't know anything specific about her mental condition. I don't know anything specific about, her father who's acted as the conservator. But what I thought was very disturbing was the millions of dollars apparently he has made on booking her gigs. He apparently gets a kickback. And at least on what I read, again, not a reputable source, it's because he is named as the conservator, not because he is he's her agent.
Like
and
the
so
business
I just thought
manager,
that was
right.
right. And so he gets a percentage of her gigs, which I just found really disturbing. Certainly a guardian, typically is a family member, and it's a role that you do out of love, certainly not to make any money. Yeah. And it's not like you get a paycheck from mom's, account every month because you're taking care of mom.
Yeah.
And so that really rubbed me the wrong way. It's just the financial incentive perhaps that he may have for serving as her guardian or conservator.
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
California law at all.
Yeah. Well, and then, there's certainly, I was reading through some things about the legal strategy and the different lawyers, because I think she had one and she's getting a new one and some of the different things there. And so I think there's some stuff that lawyers can learn about, kind of just, not the specifics of California versus Texas, but just how to approach, these situations with clients. And then, just the crossover between, my wife is the one who mentioned it to me 6 or 7 months ago. We got to watch the Britney thing. Like, what Britney thing? So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's interesting when the law crosses up with, culture like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting and also really disturbing, because if that's someone's only snapshot into conservatorship, guardianship, it can be very scary. If people can be very fearful of it if that's their only envision. Like,
sure.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Also, you referenced earlier a little bit about kind of how COVID has been impacting. We were talking about CLEs at the time, but what are you seeing as we move forward? Now we're talking here on July 1st and, hopefully on the other side of this pandemic and opening things up. But what are you seeing just in terms of your practice and the way that clients are interacting with you, the way courts are handling things or looking to handle things moving forward? What are some of the things that you're seeing there?
So if I can answer that separately. So first,
Sure.
Courts, depends where you are. So I had an in-person 12-person jury trial right before Memorial Day down in Galveston.
Okay. Wow.
It was right before the Supreme Court issued kind of its updated no mask required, but we were kind of in the limbo mode during the trial.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting. To pick a jury, with 6 feet apart, and the 6 jurors were in the jury box and the other 6 were in the gallery, and then counsel tables were very at angles. So it was very different.
Yeah.
And Montgomery County is also holding in-person hearings.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I personally have not been set for an in-person trial in 2020. But then Harris County is not yet for probate. We're not yet in person.
Yeah.
I believe I have an early fall setting for an in-person trial.
Yeah.
Hearings, I think we've had full evidentiary hearings, multi-week. We're in the middle of a temporary injunction that's gone on for weeks. It's all on Zoom.
Okay.
So full evidentiary hearings, all on Zoom. I had a trial last December, all on Zoom. And so I think that it's doable. I think there are definitely some cases that are much better in person.
Yeah.
And others that are just as good on Zoom. I will say as much with respect to the client viewpoint. Mm-hmm. We have clients all over the nation. And it has allowed us to have personal meetings, Zoom meetings, WebEx, whatever the platform may be, weekly, bi-monthly, and see the person and have that face-to-face conversation. Or if clients are, traveling, well, it's not prohibitive to have a meeting because they can just jump on their computer for 30 minutes and you can have which I think for me, I much prefer to have a face-to-face conversation versus a phone call, because you can pick up so much, especially if you're delivering bad news or, oh, by the way, you've been sued, that's something that, to see the facial reaction, versus just a phone call and, their face, entire body could drop, but on the phone call, they just seem completely normal.
Yeah.
When you see the body language and it really, you can tell. I mean, obviously being sued is not something that most people look forward to having done, but you can really I feel like you can it's better client interaction to have the Zoom capabilities.
For sure.
And I feel like clients are very getting used to it. It's not scary. I think maybe initially, how do I turn on? Where do I mute? How do I share screen? Yeah. But I think now, we've been doing this over a year. I would say majority of clients are very efficient. Some are very excited to come back into the office. My office has been open since, I'm not sure we really ever closed, but I started coming back in August, and I've been coming almost every day since August.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and I think it's important to kind of note the different courts and the different geographies and locations are going to have different rates at which they're opening up and different ways that they're handling things. And as we all know, every judge is different too, does their own thing. So what tips or is there, do you have any tips that you've picked up now over the last year since you've been able to do, it sounds like a trial, you did in-person trial in Galveston, but you've done the December one you said on Zoom. And what have you learned or could pass along about just some maybe things for young lawyers, especially that are listening to this, to think about when they're prepping for a hearing or a trial that's going to be done by Zoom or a video platform?
So they always think that your technology won't work.
Right.
Always keep calm.
Yes.
But also I think the biggest thing is you have to be much more prepared. You have to have, if you are, if you're in person, let's just say for a hearing, a summary judgment hearing, certainly your motions are already on file in front of the court. All the evidence is in front of the file in the court. So you have your outline of what your arguments are. Mm-hmm. When you're in the courtroom, you may have your pleadings binder, all these other kind of background things. Right. But being in my own office, which we're typically in a conference room when we have a large hearing, you may not necessarily bring all of that with you. You may just bring your summary judgment binder with your outline for your argument. So I think being overly prepared, certainly for any hearing, but I think even more so on Zoom because you want to have all those documents available, but also the court, I feel it's a more relaxed environment, but it's still court, still formal. Yeah. And that's the biggest gripe that I've heard from several judges is just the lack of formality that lawyers, even seasoned lawyers, have shown. It is astonishing. When I get onto a hearing and I see someone in a t-shirt, and it's someone who never would dream of going to court in anything but a, full suit, right, and polished shoes. And so I think that, being prepared, not just for your briefing and your argument, but also in how you look and, make sure you have good equipment. We have a camera, we have a full setting in my office, and it makes it much more professional looking, as if you were standing in front of the judge. Yeah,
it's a great note about I think it can happen so subtly and inadvertently. You kind of let your guard down on that formality of the court versus the casual nature of a Zoom conference, and it's really easy to have happen, I think. And I've seen it happen with interviews too, as I've been dealing with candidates and firms and setting up interviews. It can happen there too. And I just always tell the candidates, I just would treat it like it's an interview. What would you do if you're going in? What's the worst case? No one's going to dock you for being, dressed up in your interview suit for an interview, whereas they might if you're in your t-shirt and your hat on backwards, which I have had for an interview on Zoom. Oh, yeah.
Well, and the other thing I would say is you're always on camera. So whether, in hearing, sometimes there could be, 20 different, squares for all the different participants.
Right.
But you're always on camera. And I mean, I've been in a hearing and it wasn't anyone on my side, but there's a client rolling eyes or another lawyer starts laughing and all of that may happen in the courtroom, but it's certainly, I'm not going to be looking at someone else who's sitting next to me and see what they're, it goes back to the gestures and, how someone reacts.
Right.
You can't hide that on Zoom. You can hide it a little better in the courtroom.
Yeah.
At least the judge will be the one seeing it, not all the other lawyers and parties.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to change gears a little bit. When you look back or think back on your first couple of years of practice, what's something that you learned in those early years, maybe a piece of advice that you received from a mentor or a partner or something that has stuck with you and that you took to heart and is still part of how you practice today?
Confidence, trusting that what you believe is right is right. And that may sound very odd because certainly as you gain more experience, your confidence should grow. But just not necessarily confidence in the law, but just confidence in yourself, whether it be your ability to write, your ability to research a project, your ability to, say a contrary opinion to your managing, to your supervising attorney. I've found that it takes a lot of confidence, guts, whatever the appropriate word may be, to believe in yourself. Certainly I'm not saying confidence is definitely different than ego.
Right.
Because your confidence, I feel, or at least what I'm trying to convey is, certainly your confidence in your subject matter grows as you gain more experience.
Right.
But your just internal confidence of, okay, I can do this. I've prepared, I've researched the law, I'm right on the law. And what my partner is saying, that law was overturned 4 years ago. So I need to go tell them that.
Yeah.
I need to have the confidence to say you're wrong. Of course, in a respectful way. But I think that that's something that early on in my career, I did not have. And a more senior attorney told me that, I should. And that's something that's really stuck with me since then.
Yeah, that's really good. When you now think about, okay, I know something now that that I maybe learned more recently in the last maybe couple years or something like that I wish someone had pulled me aside and shared with me when I was getting started. What's something that you learned much later that you wish you had known earlier?
I think my personality and how it jives with certain clients, and it's okay for it not to work with other clients. How there are certain clients that you just are not compatible with, and that's okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So how does that work itself out? Like what if you're not clicking with a client, what now that you've kind of learned that about yourself, like, and so now what happens? How do you kind of manage through that?
Well, I think that, it depends on, if it's a strategy issue, that's one conversation.
Yeah.
If it's just more personality, which is what I was referring to, you have another lawyer primarily handle the case, another lawyer that, thankfully we have, I think there's 6 or if not 7 lawyers on my team. And we don't really work on the same cases in the sense of it's just easier for one lawyer to handle the case.
Right.
But, my personality is different from, the person next door. And, but we all work together very well as a team, but, some clients work better, female clients work better with male or vice versa. And so I think it's just case by case to figure out what's the best. Thankfully, knock on wood, it hasn't been, this is a personality, this isn't going to work. And, we just need to, you need to go find other counsel. It hasn't gotten that, because I think that, everyone is blessed with different personalities.
Sure.
And within that is a range of reason, though, of, there's some that, you just work better with others.
Yeah.
And and I think the lesson would be that's okay.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with me or my style as a lawyer or my ability to give legal advice.
Yeah.
It's just, my upbringing, my background is different from others. And, you pull on that often when you're counseling a client.
Right. No, that makes complete sense. Okay. So what about something that you see or observe in young lawyers or associates that impresses you? What can someone do as a young lawyer to stand out in your eyes?
So I think that it goes to what, I learned early on is that confidence, but specifically asking questions. And it goes both ways. I'm very impressed with young lawyers who ask questions and try to, get clarification for something that maybe not be very clear, or admitting that I don't understand what you're asking me to do. But it goes the opposite way. I get very frustrated when the questions are not asked. And it's not communication. I guess that's the better word to use, just communication. And it's a pro and a con. So I'm very impressed with younger associates who will ask the questions, communicate deadlines. Hey, I'm really swamped because this other partner has asked me to do X, Y, and Z with a deadline next week. Is yours immediate? If so, I may not be able to help you. Versus not saying anything. I assume that it's going to get done and it doesn't get done. And I follow up a week later and there's like, oh, I haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah.
So I think that probably answers also your next question, which is
on both sides. Right. Well, and that communication, it's funny, and I think it goes hand in hand with what you're saying earlier about confidence, because I think sometimes what does trip up lawyers when it comes to the communication piece is one of two things. One, they're maybe overconfident in some ways and think they don't need to ask questions because they know everything or can figure it all out. Or two, they're afraid that by asking questions, it's going to reveal either a lack of confidence or, a vulnerability that they don't know something, and that's ultimately a bad thing. How would you encourage folks maybe thinking along those lines to communicate the way you've just described it?
Well, and I think there is the difference between confidence and ego.
Right.
So, and it's two different personalities. But I think that if you don't understand, repeat the instructions, repeat the assignment, take notes. And I think that's one of the most frustrating is to have a young associate come in, they just come in your office. They don't have a pen. They don't have a paper. I mean, I've been licensed since 2008. Yeah. And I still walk around the firm with a pen and paper in hand, even if I'm just going to the kitchen, because I have too much going on that if someone asks me a one-off question or, hey, can you send an email to Joe? I likely will forget by the time I get to my office. And so it's just a good practice. It is something that I early on learned. You certainly never walk into someone else's partner's office or another lawyer's office without pen and paper in hand. Yeah. Yeah. And so I think to write down what the assignment is, look at your notes. And if you don't understand something, to ask the question. And if you understand it in the meeting, but then 2 hours later, when you start to sit down and you don't understand one aspect, send an email, have a phone call, stop by the office. I mean, I say that, I've more often than not, I have an open door policy. Oftentimes not now, it's because of COVID, noise, people on hearings or what have you, my door's closed, but that doesn't mean that, and that applies to other lawyers, but also staff. I mean, if there's something going on, I want to know. And I think it just goes to the core of just the communication. And I think that can either make or break a team. Yeah.
It's people listening that listen regularly will probably remember this. I'm going to miss some of this, but we had talked with, I think it was Jim Chester that we had on the show, another Baylor lawyer up in Dallas, but he talked about when you leave a partner's office to know, what's being asked in what form is it needed? Like, is it a brief? Is it a memo? Is it is it a motion? Like, knowing what actually you're and then also the time frame that it needs to be done in. If you walk out of the office and you don't know those things, I think I'm missing one, then you really don't know what you're doing yet. And so like making sure you're clear on all those pieces so the expectations are clear up front and what's being asked is clear up front is so important. Because otherwise there's going to be a breakdown somewhere. And so I think having that pen and paper, like you're just talking about, one of my colleagues at the law school that I worked with, would always harp on that with our students and especially, as I know she would give advice on resumes and they'd be sitting there just listening and not writing anything down. Like, do you want to take notes on this? Or it's like, no, what?
You're going to forget. Yeah. I mean,
there's like
I'm
10
telling
things.
you ABC, and you think you understand and remember ABC. I guarantee by the time you go to write the motion, you're going to remember A and C, and you'll forget B.
Yeah.
Or maybe you'll remember it's sort of like this, but then you go on a rabbit trail, and it's in your research or whatever it may be. So I think
exactly.
I mean, it's also just more efficient for the client if I have an idea of how I want it to flow. Take that with a grain of salt or take it, 100%. And if you want to come challenge and say, hey, I think that it flows better this way. Sure. Let's talk about it.
Right. Yeah.
So
great. Okay. So when you have the opportunity to hire associates and looking at resumes, interviewing folks and all of that, I want to ask you about that. So what is something that you're looking for that stands out on paper, like in a resume or maybe a cover letter that makes you think, hey, this is someone that I would be interested in interviewing or taking another step forward with? What stands out on paper for candidates as they're applying?
I mean, I think certainly, the academics, where they went to undergrad, where they went to law school. But I think I think that's across the board. Everyone's looking at that. They don't get in the door unless they meet the standard. For me personally, I like to look at kind of the extracurriculars. What are their interests? Do they like hiking? Have they hiked Kilimanjaro? Have they, do they go scuba diving? Do they, just having that so you can know what the person is like.
Right.
Because on paper, you and I could have a very similar resume, but, I've done X, Y, and Z, and you've done A, B, C. Mm-hmm. And it's not saying, on paper, we could look identical, but I've done this. It makes me better. It makes me a better candidate for this job or, whatever it may be. And so I think that, there's also a risk. And I'm sure someone who is focused on resumes and resume writing could disagree with me. From the, have gone through the, I do that. I have that on my resume. I have, personal things that I've done and kind of, I took a non-traditional route to law school. I was pre-med until my junior year in college. And that's something that's very unique. But it also, what I've studied has, I feel like the path makes sense where I am now. Mm-hmm. And so I think that everyone has their own unique path. And if you can exhibit that somehow on a piece of paper, by no means am I suggesting a pink resume with perfume, a la Legally Blonde.
Right, of course.
Just because, but I think if you can somehow make it pop with what, your specific interest, or if you, I personally, just something different. If you're on mock trial, I think that's great, but that doesn't tell me anything about you. Right.
Is it different if they're coming from another firm, like they've been out for a few years in practice and are lateraling over as opposed to being right out of law school? How does that look? Or is there anything different that you're looking for at that point?
I think at that point, and I'm not sure if I've seen this on the resume, but certainly the question I ask is why? Why are you looking to move? And is this going to be a good move for you? Is this going to be a good fit? Yeah. Because I don't like to see a lot of bouncing around. It makes me wonder what is wrong with this person? Why can they not sustain a job for more than a year or 2 years? Mm-hmm. Are they electing to move, or are they being asked to move? And you can read into it so much and be wrong.
Yeah.
And I think it's different if, you're moving from, one state to another state,
sure.
or you're married spouse, relocates, or, I think there's a lot of reasons why that can be given to explain it. But I'm not certain that I've ever seen anything written down like on that initial glance at a resume for a lateral. I mean, it's more just an interview of, because I want to make sure, especially if we're bringing someone on, that it's a right fit, that they're going to be here for more than 1 or 2 years.
Right.
Because it's an investment, whether if it's a young lawyer or a lateral partner coming over. I mean, it's an investment that the firm makes in that person.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And so, and I did want to ask you about the interview stage. What have you seen in interviews that works well and that impresses you? Or maybe on the other side, what's something that can happen in an interview that can harm someone's chances?
I think
she's smiling. I'm hoping for.
I'm smiling because it's almost. It's a theme I think you're going to see in my answers. But being able to exhibit calmness, even if you're a mess inside, I think that, sweaty palms and profusely sweating on the face. And, people get nervous, and I understand that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've been there. I still am there. I had butterflies before I saw your face today. I mean, it's just, just inevitably.
No, I know.
Before every hearing, even though I've been in front of, I can't even say how many hearings I've had, I still get those just jitters. And I think that's healthy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But there's difference between like kind of butterfly jitters, excitement for an opportunity and just flat out nervousness.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how one should overcome that other than just practice with friends, practice with friends of friends, just interviewing. Because, I remember back to the days of initial interviews. I was a nervous wreck. But I, intentionally would wear clothing that was comfortable. I would wear I would, not eat anything or drink anything an hour before to make sure I didn't have any stomach, pains.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
But I think that in the actual interview, just the ability to come with questions, so chat. And that's what I always find the hardest is when I get asked a question. I get asked a question when I'm interviewing someone. It's not, why should I come here? That's not a fair question, but, a specific question and one that shows that you've actually looked at the firm website. You've seen, presumably they know who they're meeting with, and, you do your research. If you're meeting with myself, you're meeting with someone in the real estate group, you're meeting with someone, whatever, just different departments to know and have, maybe not specific question because that's not your area of law, but just so, hey, I saw that. You've done this, or, can you tell me a little bit more about your practice area? Because that may be something I'm interested in. Just kind of just make it more of a conversation as opposed to a Q&A. I think that makes it, I think it relieves some of the nervousness because it makes you kind of get into a routine of just kind of having a conversation as opposed to, oh my gosh, I'm here hoping to better myself for a job.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's so many good nuggets in there. People probably, if you're about to interview, you should go back and listen to that again because there was a bunch there. Take those notes that we were talking about in the last question because, when you're talking about preparation and practicing, I think sometimes as lawyers, we think we can, if we can handle a judge or a trial, we can handle an interview, surely, and we don't need to practice for it or prepare for it. And that's not true. It's a totally different environment, a totally different experience. And you do need to prepare for it if you're going to do your best. If you don't want to do your best, I guess that's your choice. But, if you want to do your best, you prepare for it. And it does also calm those nerves just like anything else. If you've done it a few times, you've kind of worked some kinks out. That's helpful. And then, asking questions shows so much more preparation, interest, and curiosity about the firm. And then it takes a lot of the weight off of you because you can let other people talk in the interview. And that's actually a good thing, I think, to have that back and forth. So there's just those are three that just, I didn't write them down. I should have taken my notes, but those are off my head. I'm sure there were more. But so many good things right there. So that's awesome. Thanks for that. Okay. So we'll finish with our rapid fire questions. But before we do that, is there anything that we haven't touched on yet that you would want to leave with the audience, or something maybe we didn't go as deep on that you'd want to follow up on? Anything like that?
I think the one thing is there's never a good time to kind of have the hard conversations with yourself, with your manager, with your spouse. I mean, that goes, outside of professional. And what I mean is you have to be comfortable in where you are and what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So out of law school, I went to big law, and I was unmarried, did not have children. And that was great for that stage of life. But when I did become married and I did have children, that was not a sustainable lifestyle. I think for me, that was important to find that work-life balance. Mm-hmm. And some days it's great. Other days it's terrible. And I think if anyone tells you that they always have work-life balance, they're lying. I unfortunately in COVID had the opportunity to be a full-time mom for a couple of weeks, and it was not good. Not because I love my children, but because I am trained to be a lawyer. And I'm a mom. I have a 6 and 3-year-old, and it's something where, the weekends are great, family vacations are great, and then we have a couple hours every day. I mean, they're in school. And so I think that finding that work-life balance, I think, is really important if that's something that is important to you. And of course, it's not for everyone, and I respect that. Absolutely. But I think that to know that everything comes in waves and stages in life, and to recognize that that's okay is, I think, really important, because I had a hard time making the switch. Mm-hmm. And thinking that, coming from a litigation law school, I needed to litigate, I needed to go to big law, and that's what was expected. Right. Whether or not that was a valid expectation or not, we'll just leave that alone. Right. I think that knowing, being true to yourself and being who you are is really important. And certainly that's not something you're going to learn in law school, not going to something you're going to learn in your 30s. Maybe, later in life, maybe you'll learn a little more about yourself. But I feel like it's a continuing, evolving discussion to just kind of know who you are and where you want to be.
Yeah, I think that's great. And as you kind of described your situation over time, is things change and your seasons of life change. And so what might work for you at 27 or 31 may not work at 36 or 42. And then when you get to a different age, so there's like these stages that can happen, and I think can adjust, and so I think like not, one of the things I've talked to candidates about before too is, not to feel like they have to, because at 25, when they first got out of law school, this is what they wanted, that now that they're 35 and they want to do something, like they feel tied to that first idea of what they were supposed to do and be, and now they're resisting the change, and which might be right, but might not be. And it's like not judging yourself for that. If you make the switch, it's fine. Like people change and goals change, seasons of life change. And I think it's like, counterproductive to, beat yourself up over, making changes versus what you thought you were going to do 5 or 10 years before.
Absolutely. And I think on that note, I know you said you wanted to wrap up, but on that note, I would also add that, it's never meet a stranger, in the sense of, I'm not saying always be in elevator, network mode, but I feel that more often than not, you don't know where your next client is going to come from, or your next referral. You don't know. It could be someone that you meet in the grocery store and you see them every week because y'all go for milk and eggs at the same time. And all of a sudden their mother died and they are just distraught. They don't even know where to go. And mom had a huge business. And, it's like, oh, here's my card. Yeah. And, I'm not saying that to be, sort of an ambulance chaser by chance, but it's more like you just do not know where, the next client will come from. And so I think that, on the path of, seasons change, but, you can, and it may not be, I'm not the right lawyer. It could be, my colleague at another firm, or, hey, I know this person. And I just feel like being nice, and it will get you so far in life. I mean, my grandmother used to say, you get much more with, you get more flies with honey. And I mean, she's product of the Great Depression. I feel like that's something that you're really, it's true. Right. And, I would much prefer for someone to come to me and I have to say, no, I can't help you. However, I have this friend or a classmate, that does that exact thing, or, whatever it may be.
That's great. Absolutely. Well, thanks for that. And so, okay, our rapid fire questions to end, one word or one phrase, answers. We'll go through these. All right. Name the one trait or characteristic that you most want to see in an associate.
Communication.
There you go. What habit has been key to your success?
Perseverance.
All right. Your favorite app or productivity tool?
iTimekeep.
iTimekeep. I don't think I've heard that one before, so that's good. We'll go ahead.
Well, no. So it's on your cell phone. It hooks into our billing software.
Okay.
But you can dictate it or enter it on your phone. So while you're sitting, cooking dinner or watching sports, whatever, you can put it in.
That's awesome. I'll put a link to it in the show notes if people want to check that out, for sure. All right. Speaking of interests on your resume, you were talking about this. What would you list first on your resume's interest section?
Probably family.
Family. Awesome.
Yeah. As an interest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Be totally different.
All right. Lastly, your favorite legal movie. Did you tip your hand earlier?
Not intentionally, but I'm really torn. I know it's supposed to be one answer. So either Legally Blonde or The Firm. I'm really torn.
Yeah.
Because both are amazing storylines.
Yeah. It's funny. I feel like if I go back, the folks that mention two almost always mention Legally Blonde as one of their two. I'm wondering if they feel like they have to hedge off the Legally Blonde with like a more serious suspense one.
Britney Spears and
Oh yeah.
I insinuated the perfume resume.
Yes, you did.
I mean, there's certain things that it is a wonderful, and I am blonde and I'm a lawyer.
Yes,
I think it's innate that it's Legally Blonde, but I can't get off of The Firm though. I think when
great.
I don't remember when that movie came out, but it doesn't have your Hollywood jazz and wonderful like screenshots, but the storyline and the acting is just so good. And it's in New Orleans, which is wonderful.
It is.
It's in New Orleans, right? Or is it in Alabama?
Memphis, right?
Memphis.
Yeah. But it kind of has, a lot of those Grisham books and movies have those Southern, Memphis, Nashville, Georgia, Alabama. I kind of have that feel. And so, for people, we've done, so we do legal movie deep dives on here occasionally. We've done Legally Blonde, so people can go listen to that if they want to. I'll put a link to it. And then we haven't done The Firm yet, but that's on the list for sure to hit soon. So we'll do that one. It's because it is a great one. So, all right. Well, Kathleen, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. Really appreciate it and wish you and your firm all the best.
Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate it.
All right. My thanks again to Kathleen Turner Beduze for joining us on the show today. If you enjoyed this episode, would you do two things for me? Would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And then would you rate and review the podcast in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen? If you have suggestions or thoughts about the show, or if I could help you in any way, please email me, daniel@varsitysearch.com. Likewise, if you're interested, or maybe someone you know might be interested in any of the opportunities that I mentioned at the top of the show, or would just like to visit in general about what's going on in the market and what opportunities there might be out there for you, please get in touch. Would love to visit with you. Also, don't forget to, if you haven't yet had the chance, to go back and listen to The Law of Seinfeld and our fun breakdown of all things legal throughout the series Seinfeld. It was a lot of fun. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thanks again so much to each of you for listening. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and we'll talk with you next time.